They're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody, we welcome you in Off the Bench here on a Tuesday. And I'm beginning to feel like this show, when it comes to the lineup of the hosts, it's like a David Bell lineup. Every day it's something different. It's not like Francona where everything is the exact same. It's different every day. Justin Kinner with you here. Pearl and Jacob back in the studio. Pearl, Jacob, good morning. No Reed, no Casey, no Elliott, but we still have Off the Bench, and we have a lot to talk about today.
Yeah, this would be like if the 2012 Heat, it was LeBron and Shane Battier and Ray Allen. So Pearl and I will bang some threes, and you can hopefully go for a 40-point triple-double today.
So who's Bosch and who's Wade?
No, I'm Shane Battier. I'll give you that 4 threes, 12-point game that he had against the Spurs, and you're really going to have to do the rest. And so that should be fun today. Pearl, who's your player comp from the 2012 through 2014 Heat?
I can't confirm that. I'm not an NBA person.
I'll give you you're Udonis Haslem. You'll be the force in the paint and the glue that holds
every day
show
shows
together.
up.
I trust you.
Yeah.
I trust you.
Day in, day out, big consistency.
I think I'm more Chris Bosch than anything. I'm
Okay.
out too often. But that's why Pearl is Udonis Haslem at this point. She's going to be the one that's here every day moving forward. So there's
22 years.
Yeah. I like for 22 years. Will this show be around in 22 days? That's the question.
We'll see.
I like the graphic for the show today. Reds lose. Just that.
Yeah. I was trying to think through it. I had a couple Terry Francona titles on there, and I just decided, you know what? We'll just keep it simple. They lost. Pearl and I did get a few laughs with the perspective titles, but we just went we went with Reds lose.
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you sound as defeated as the Reds at this point. Look, we did get to see last night again, and we can't, show clips of the post game, unfortunately. I should have just pulled the audio. But again, my favorite matchup, okay? If Casey was here, he would get this. If WrestleMania was coming up, my main event, if I'm a booker for WWE, I would be really pushing to Triple H that I think that the main event for WrestleMania or SummerSlam or whatever PLE they have coming up, I want the main event with everything on the line. I want Charlie Goldsmith to take on Terry Francona because I think that right now that is the number one rivalry in baseball. We could talk about the Mets and the Yankees. We could talk about the Yankees and the Red Sox, the Cubs and the Cardinals. I mean, go down the list. Rivalry weekend, be damned. Let's just get a ring and put Charlie Goldsmith and Terry Francona in a ring. I don't know who I would take. I'm going to be pulling for Goldsmith, but man, Francona, the looks that he gives, the tone that he uses, and the vibes that he gives off, he's not a Charlie Goldsmith fan like we are.
No, not one bit. And I think yesterday there was some genuine confusion on his face why he would possibly suggest that Matt McClain hit over Garrett Hampson. And that's the most concerning part to me, is that seemed to be a startling question for our Hall of Fame manager. Man, this run, Pearl and I were talking about it before the show, even the bottom of the barrel, worst case scenario for Terry Francona, maybe record-wise is worse than this, but I didn't think I'd feel as bad about him as the manager of this team as I do this early in the season.
I also feel like, I don't know if you guys feel it, but I've observed his demeanor has shifted the last couple weeks. When the season started, he'd roll off losses and still have a smile, be like the most positive guy in Cincinnati, and he had faith in his team through and through. But now, I don't feel that. Something shifted. He's not feeling as warm to media. Right. He doesn't seem as positive. He doesn't want to. He used to give pretty elaborate press conference thing. Like, I could listen to him talk forever, but now it's kind of like when Bell was doing press conference, I didn't want to listen to him.
We're getting some David Bell press conferences out of Francona for sure.
Well, the thing is, look, I had a different view on the Terry Francona take when it came to Matt McLain. We talked about this yesterday at length about Matt McLain and what the Reds need to do with him. Everyone's saying, Jake, I heard you say it, there was confusion by Terry Francona on why Charlie Goldsmith or you or me or Pearl or anybody would suggest that Matt McLain should pinch hit for Hampson down, the last at bat, bottom of the ninth, down a run. There was confusion. He probably could have been looking at Goldsmith like, haven't you been writing about how bad McLain is? Haven't all of you been telling me how bad McLain is? McLain's out of this damn lineup because you pushed him out of the lineup. You were telling me how crazy I am for having him in the lineup, and now I'm crazy because he's hitting 175 and you want me to pinch hit in the bottom of the ninth.
Right.
I looked at it a little differently. I looked at it from that perspective of more concern of, man, is that Terry Francona telling us that he doesn't even have faith in Matt McLain at this point? Or was this kind of a middle finger to everyone else saying, oh, now you want me to put him in the lineup? It's funny how that works.
Yeah, you're certainly right. And if you wanted to, say, well, Matt McLain's not, how about Austin Wynns, who's actually still on this team? I think some people might have forgot about. Yeah, he's still hitting pretty well. Surprisingly, those numbers don't really move when you don't get at bats. So he's hitting the exact same as last time we talked about Austin Wynns.
27 with runners in scoring position.
Yeah, he's taken 3 at bats in the last 7 days. I can't wrap my head around why he's on this roster if he's not going to hit at all.
Yeah, he's just a body on the bench.
Right. And there has to be better bodies to have on the bench if you need a body on the bench. So I don't know what the answer is with Austin Wynns. You'd think if he's going to play in any situation, maybe it is last night if they wanted to give McLain a full day off. And you do have Garrett Hampson coming up with 2 outs. But, hey, Hampson fits the Reds model of what they're looking for in a hitter. No power and about a 200 batting average.
Yeah, the reason I was pulling for Hampson last night in that final at bat was, for one, yes, to tie the game up, but 2, our guy Elliott had a nice little healthy bet on anytime home run from Hampson, and I thought, no, there's no way. Like, I would have called Trace and said, I don't know what you have planned for Elliott, but if Hampson would have hit that, he would have won that bet. Elliott would have been on the show today. I would have forced it up and made it happen, but he didn't hit it. He out. Reds lose again. They struggle scoring after the 6th inning. They're 0-24 now, after trailing after the 6th inning. Not good.
That stat really can't sound much worse. Like, it sounds pretty bad, but I saw someone just really spell it out yesterday. I think it was Lance McAllister. It was the Reds are 20-something after the 6th inning, and after the 6th inning, every player on your team is guaranteed an at bat, and they have a 0% chance of coming back. And it's just like when you spell it out, man. I mean, this team's playing a 5-inning game. They're only playing half a baseball game, and then it's just over if they're trailing. It couldn't get too much different than the 2023 Reds. I mean, the 2023 Reds could have been down 3-4 runs going into the 8th or 9th.
They were the Rally Reds.
And we'd be sitting there with America's team, Captain America Jonathan India, thinking, hey, they're going to come back.
Right.
And now this team just has no chance if they're down after 6. It's crazy how this has went exactly the opposite direction as most of us thought it was going to go that summer of 23.
I just don't understand how you let this stat 0-24 when trailing after 6 innings keep going, like 0, not even 1. How do you not, scratch your head and try to just figure out some solution? He's like, it just frustrates me. And that Francona's the manager he is. There's a lot of confusion on my end.
Yeah, it's getting as frustrating as it can be, and I guess they could win tonight, but that would then make Game 3 a rubber match, and we know that won't happen.
Well,
so now they just lost the series because they were down after 6 innings in Game 1.
Right.
Great.
Yeah, Game 1's always the game I feel the most confident in. And, I wasn't surprised to see the Reds jump out early. Elly De La Cruz setting the tone. We're going to talk about him coming up here in a moment. He's going to be missing some time. I don't know how much time, but they announced in the broadcast last night that after the Game 3 on Wednesday wraps up with the Brewers, he's going to be heading home to spend some time with his family. Unfortunately, it's sad news that, he had lost his sister over the weekend. And he just wants to continue to be there for his team, but he is going to be there for his family after the game on Wednesday. They gave no update as far as like how long he'll be gone. And look, I don't think that matters. He needs to be gone as long as it needs to be there for his family. But again, I don't never want to sound insensitive, but from a baseball perspective, for a team that struggles offensively and to score runs, and he's actually been a run producer for them, especially lately. Yesterday, we saw it on display. He's hit home runs over the last couple of games. I mean, he's really kind of picked it up lately. Things are going to get really interesting in the coming days. No doubt about it. But we're not done with Reds talk. We'll step away for a few minutes. I want to talk about the Reds' struggles again. That 0-24 record when trailing after the sixth inning. What is it about the Reds that they just can't seem to get it going late in ball games? You guys talked about it. They were one of the most clutch teams in baseball just a few years ago. It's a lot of the same guys with good additions in the offseason, additions that we weren't totally enamored with at the time, but some of their best players are the guys they added in the offseason. You add that to a core that was very clutch a few years ago. Where has that gone? We'll discuss when we come back. More Off the Bench next. All right, everybody, we welcome you back again off the bench. Justin, Pearl, and Jacob with you here on a Tuesday. The Cincinnati Reds lose another one last night, 3-2 the final. And their record when trailing after 6 innings of play, well, it doesn't improve. It just increases to 0-24, I guess. Like, that's not a good record when you're trailing late in the game. There's just no clutch gene with this team. And you start to break it down as far as what's going on, what is leading to some of these issues when it comes down to it. You know, the Reds in innings 1 through 6, okay, they're actually 5th in runs per game in innings 1 through 6. They average about 3.38 runs per game in the first 6 innings of a game. I think, Pearl, the other day we were doing our score predictions, and you talked about the fact, I think someone had talked about one of the low scoring games. You said, well, if they're going to put up runs, they always do it early. They jump on teams early. They do. They're more times than not, the Reds are the aggressors for whatever reason. They just seem to lose that aggressiveness. They seem to lose that urgency or whatever it is down the stretch. The Reds 5th in baseball in runs per game in innings 1 through 6, and they are 22nd in baseball in innings 7 through 9, averaging just a hair over 1 run per game in those final 3 innings. The run production completely falls off, and that's just something that it has led to these issues with this team. It's like once I feel like, okay, we get out of that 5th, 6th inning, if the Reds are even down by 1, it feels like in basketball, a team that's down by 20. It feels like in football when you're down by 3 touchdowns with 7 minutes to go. You just feel like there's no chance, and it's just one measly run. This team can't produce. They can't score runs. They can't do anything, it seems, in the final 3 innings, and the numbers depict that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to find before when we came back from break there, is just how bad those numbers do drop off in the 7th through 9th innings. And, I mean, this team's not phenomenal. offensively, but they're happily average in the first through third and fourth through six. 263, 329, 440 slash line in the first through third, 255, 325, 415 in the fourth through six. Pretty similar there. And then you get to the seventh through ninth, and this team's barely above the Mendoza. They're hitting 208 in the seventh through ninth innings with a 300 OBP, slugging just 321. That's a 627 OPS. That is abysmal for an entire team in the back 3 innings of a game when you're deciding when you win or lose the majority of those games. So yeah, it's about as frustrating as you can get. It's an 81 OPS plus for this team in the 7th through 9th innings. 81. League average is 100. That's significantly below, and they're well above in the other 2 sets of 3 innings. It's almost perplexing how they can fall off that significantly, just arbitrarily, when it flips from the 6th to the 7th inning. It really doesn't make any sense, and it's happening for everyone on really the entire lineup. I'm sure there's an outlier here or there if you look at the individual stats, but for this big of a swing for the team in those innings, it has to be the vast majority of the players, and that's when you have to ask the question, do we not have enough talent that the lights get too bright and they can't handle it when you need them to get a hit and get a win? Or is there something going wrong with the teaching and the philosophy that we're having these hitters take late in games that's resulting in being unable to get on base? I don't know what it is, but it's a problem we have to get fixed, because if we're relying on scoring 7-10 runs in the first 6 innings to try to win any game, it's not a good way to do it.
I mean, could it be, and could it come down to, and I managerial construction of lineups and just adjustments and just anything down the stretch as well. We put it on players, now the players disappear. But how many times have we questioned decisions that Francona has made late in games with games on the line, leaving Espinal in, which I didn't think was the biggest sin in the world. Espinal, not a horrible hitter, but in that particular situation against the pitcher that he was going up against, there's just, with Espinal last night, we saw it with Hampson, there's just way too many games, close one-run games. One-run games, by the way, is what ultimately led to, or at least one of the excuses that Nick Krall used to justify moving on from David Bell. We're seeing David Bell was the over adjuster that the non-analytical fans just absolutely would hate about David Bell, was just the constant adjustments, the constant switching of players and moving the lineups around and moving players around defensively. It would drive older fans crazy, or the more conservative baseball fans crazy. Terry Francona is the complete opposite. It just seems like he doesn't make any adjustments. He doesn't care. I mean, no matter who comes up in the order at the most high leverage of moments, there is no adjustments. There's no pinch hitters. There's no defensive switches. There's nothing. And I understand that I'm an old school baseball guy a little bit, and I've always said, hey, I'm going to be more of a Francona La Russa type guy. But La Russa didn't go well for him when he came back. And the White Sox were in a similar situation as the Reds, where the White Sox had one of the best farm systems in baseball. They called up a lot of their younger talent. They brought in La Russa thinking, man, you put that veteran, World Series caliber, manager in that clubhouse with that young core. The sky's the limit. It didn't go well. And I'm hoping that's not what's happening here. But, man, it has similar vibes to that La Russa White Sox run, and I don't want to see that because I'm one of the biggest Francona fans out there.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. And a lot of the conversation we have around this team and this franchise, we focus a lot, and we say it basically every day. If the core's not good, the team's not going to be good. And obviously that's Elly and McLean carrying a lot of that weight, playing at an all-star level. And I think the conversation we had when we hired Terry Francona is what we're kind of talking about here now, whether we like it or not and whether he belongs there or not. He's now part of that core. If Terry Francona is not swinging this team the way we expected him to with that hire to get them into contention and have them play better and raise the ceiling of a lot of these young players, then he's not doing his job, and he's not going to help this team the way we all expected him to. The only reason we thought, even those of us like Elliot and I that weren't as big of fans of the Terry Francona hire, it was the best hire we could have made. We just never quite sided with people that said he was going to be worth 10 to 12 wins or anything along those lines. The manager can't do that much, but it feels like even the little bit of boost that we thought he was going to be able to give this team, he hasn't. And if anything, he's using the players in mind-boggling situations that don't match their skill sets and maybe costing this team production and wins in a season where you have no wiggle room in production or wins if you want to be competitive. So it's about as frustrating as you can come. I think if you rank it, Elly or McLean struggling, check that box, and Terry Francona being a frustrating manager, check that box, are the two most frustrating possible outcomes for this season for the Reds. Maybe throw Hunter in that first group, and he's obviously been great so far. That's been fun to watch, but this is tough, and you can't help but think about the White Sox. I mean, when we were talking about this core coming up, Reed said it all the time, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but we would all point to the Orioles and say, 100 wins the last 2 years. We're going to be like the Orioles with this young core. And he would say, well, in the 2020 White Sox, they were really good too, and then they fell off the face of the earth. I look at the Orioles this year, and the meme with the guy, the illusion of free will, when you go down the two paths, and it's the same outcome at the back?
Yeah.
White Sox and Orioles core. Is it just the same outcome no matter what? Young core with the front office unwilling to supplement with big money and contracts from free agency? If you don't do that, does it not matter how good your young core is, and you're always going to end up at the same spot? I hope not. I hope the Reds can turn it around, but I think this is as close to bottoming out as I've been as a Reds fan for a while.
I kind of wonder with what I was talking about earlier and like how frustrated that it's seeming that Francona is and his demeanor changing, and like he started when he was signed, he called each of the players individually, started a really good just environment for all the players, and now I'm wondering if that's having some sort of negative effect, because if his demeanor's shifting, everybody's demeanor's going to shift.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the root right there.
And with that shift and a little bit more of him not seemingly having as much fun back in the dugout, back on the sidelines, is there any worry starting to creep into your head, Reds fans' heads, that maybe we don't get the full 4 years out of him? I mean, this is a guy that retired not that long ago for health concerns.
We're already
and
paying
not
two
having a lot of fun.
managers
Like,
right now.
I don't know if we can, have a ton of faith in Tito getting through this whole contract if this team's not going to be competitive. So I think we got to start asking those questions too. Are we going to lose the guy we just brought in because this team's not what he thought it was? I don't know.
Financially, I don't think so, because I don't think Reds want to pay three managers.
Oh, not that they would fire him.
No, but
I'm saying if he packs it up and goes.
Packs it up? Well.
That house in Arizona looked pretty cool, and this team is not very good.
Who is letting down one another more? Is Francona letting the Reds down more, or is the front office letting Francona down more? I mean, like, we had Marty Brenneman on 2 weeks ago and said, look, at a certain point, I mean, to be a good manager, you have to have good players. And we thought that this team had good enough players to be competitive. And let's be clear, they're 3 games under 500. They're on pace to be within a 500 record. I mean, 82 and 82. I don't get all warm and fuzzy inside for 500 records in baseball. It's simply about winning 90 games, making the playoffs. It's as simple as that. You're not hanging banners for, I mean, the Reds have recently missed the playoffs winning, 84, 85 games. We've seen that. And this team could potentially be that team. We've seen the Reds 2 years ago miss the playoffs by 2 games. We've seen them be competitive, but at the end of the day, right now, it just seems like there's a lot of criticism going towards Terry Francona, but, he's managing the way he has managed his last couple of teams that have been World Series caliber teams because they had World Series caliber talent. You can't hire one of the best chefs in the world, give him crap ingredients, and expect him to make one of the best meals in the world. This is where the conversation of managing in baseball, it always comes back to this. It always comes back to this in any sport, really. But at the end of the day, it is interesting to see who's gonna blow up first. Is it going to be the front office that gives up on Francona, or Francona gives up on the front office? That is, we're very ahead of schedule on that conversation.
Yeah.
But I say that, but man, if Francona, who managed in Boston, all right, that's a heavy media market over there. He's dealt with 85 Charlie Goldsmiths, and he's struggling keeping his cool and we keep bringing up Charlie Goldsmith. Guys, if you guys don't watch the postgame, the postgame press conferences, Charlie Goldsmith, all the complaints that fans have on social media, all of the question marks that we have about the lineup construction and about the usages of certain players in high leverage situations, Charlie Goldsmith is the only media member that has not the guts, but has a way of framing the question to try to get a response or a justification or a reason from him. And he's losing his cool or patience with him. And that's just one Charlie Goldsmith. And if he's struggling handling one media member after some of these struggles, I feel like he's only going to get more and more frustrated. They're 9 games back in the division now. 9 games back. They could be double-digit games back in the NL Central. by Wednesday if things don't turn around in these next couple of games. So things are starting to get a little iffy, if you ask me.
I think it's a little bit difficult to blame the front office, which is so hard to say, and I still want to blame the front office. But if you go through the list of players on this team that are playing well and helping this team win the games that they are able to win, isn't it just the guys they signed this offseason?
Yeah.
Jose Trevino, Austin Wynns, Gavin Lux. These guys have been great. They've been the most consistent, best players on this team offensively. So I would love to blame the front office, and I think big picture, I still will. But for this season and how it's gone so far, my blame doesn't go any further than the core of this team that we expected to be the engine. If Matt McClain, not even hitting what he was in 2023, if Matt McClain was hitting 230 and playing better defense closer to where he was in 2023 when he was the better defensive second baseman in all of baseball, and Elly was playing how he is now for the entirety of this year instead of the slump where you called it out earlier in the season, Kenner, and Spencer Steer wasn't well below league average as a bat, this team's better. And it's just the guys that we thought were more sure things. And I keep going back to the point Elliot made on our opening day stream. And he said, it's so frustrating with this team because we have so many question marks everywhere. There's only a few things we know for sure, and everything else is question marks. Those things we thought we knew for sure have been distantly the biggest disappointments this season, except for the pitching staff, just talking offensively, have been distantly the biggest disappointing parts this season. And that's just not sustainable really for any team. I mean, if the Dodgers had their top 4 players hitting 200, they'd be better than the Reds are right now because their 10th through 15th players would be top 10 players on our team. But they would still struggle. If your core and your stars are struggling, it doesn't matter how good your roster is. You're going to struggle. And the Reds are one of those teams that need everything to go well. We know they don't handle adversity well. We know they can't adapt when things hit them that they aren't expecting. But they have no chance when Elly and McClain aren't going to play at a near all-star level, at a great level, because the only reason we think that this team and this core should be competitive, and it hurts so bad that they haven't been yet, is because most of us Reds fans are thinking, if we aren't competitive with Hunter Green and Matt McClain and Elly De La Cruz, when will we ever be competitive? So the fact that we're still sitting here at 500, I think that's why we're all just losing our minds. We're running out of time to see probably the best core we're ever going to have.
We're not only just running out of time this season, but we're running out of time because we're on a timeline for not only Francona and the core. And I completely agree with what you said. Front office isn't really to blame necessarily. Francona's not to blame. It's just the core just underperforming as much as they have been. That's the only really red flag here. Really big red flag.
All right, this is Off the Bench. Justin, Pearl, and Jacob with you here on a Tuesday. The Reds 3-2 the final last night, losing their 3rd straight. And again, their struggles against the Brewers just continuing. The Reds have lost 17 of the last 21 against the Brewers at home. And it's not just the struggles against the Brewers at home. Again, it's just against the Brewers, whether it's in Milwaukee, whether it's in Cincinnati, whether it's on the moon. 14-35 against the Brewers over the last 4 years. And now they seem to have a mental block with the Cubs. Earlier, by the way, we were talking about, the Reds top 5 in baseball in runs per game in the first 6 innings of play. And then, 22nd in baseball, just over a hair over a 1 run per game in the final 3 innings. And it kind of correlates to what we're seeing with their 0-24 record when trailing after 6 innings. There's just no pop. There's no production in the final high leverage innings of the ball game. The Cubs, we've seen the Reds who jump out to big early leads against the Cubs. This season, the Cubs are the number 1 team in baseball in runs per game in the final 3 innings. And I think we've seen that on display against them. And the Reds have struggled with the Cubs. They're struggling with the Brewers. They split with the Cardinals the first time they played. I know they have the Cardinals down the road again. But, man, the Reds are about to potentially be at 9 games back of the division, double-digit games back potentially, and them and the Pirates looking up at everybody else. We thought it would be different, and it just doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. Game 2 tonight against the Brewers, and we're going to get to see Hunter Green on the mound. How we feel about the Reds and Brewers tonight with Hunter Green on the mound is the Reds who have struggled, regardless of who's on the mound against this Brewers team in recent years. But it feels like, as wild as this sounds, when it comes to what's coming up for the schedule-wise, I feel like they need this game. They need this game. Does it win them the series? No. but we know what they do in game 3 as well. So it's like one of those things where I feel like with Hunter Green on the mound, almost every game that Hunter Green's on the mound, it is a must win. They get good quality starting pitching, regularly, but I feel like you can't miss when he's on the mound. They have to get a win with Hunter Green here tonight.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. You know, they either win or lose in game 2. They're probably not going to win game 3. And we know Hunter Green gives us the best chance to win games whenever he's on the mound. I'll go a step further than you and not say almost. I will say every game Hunter Green's on the mound is damn near a must win, because worst case scenario, he's going to allow 3 runs? Oh no. A competent major league lineup should be able to win that game. So, yeah, Hunter Green on the mound, we should be confident. And maybe it's the only 1 out of 5 days, 2 out of 5 days with how Abbott's throwing right now that we should be overly confident in this team having a chance to win, but we should be tonight. And you put Hunter Green on the mound the same day you're selling me $3 beers, and I'm going to be as confident as possible. So, 3-2-1 night with Hunter Green against the Brewers. I'll be down there. It should be a win. I'm going to predict a win today. Spoiler alert for later in the show.
Okay.
All right, coming up later. Speaking of later on in the show, we'll get into the Cincinnati Bengals. Pro Football Focus put out their rankings, ranking the NFL rosters. The Cincinnati Bengals, who of course are at the top, headlined by Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. You would think that that's a roster that's stacked pretty high. Not so high, if you really think about it and look at the list for Pro Football Focus. We'll talk about that. We'll take a look at the teams ahead of the Bengals in that list, but we'll get to that coming up later on in the show. Let's continue with the Reds real quick. We talked about Hunter Green and how it feels like that's every time he's on the mound, it's a must-win. Pitching, obviously the strength of this team. It's the strength of this team at the major league level, and it's obviously the strength of this team at the minor league level. In fact, the Reds have one of the best pitching prospects in all of Major League Baseball. So should we expect to see Chase Burns called up soon? Nick Krall, not a big fan of that idea. We'll discuss when we come back. Pitching, more pitching. You can never have enough pitching, or can you? I mean, imagine having one of the best pitching prospects in baseball that is just absolutely just mowing his way through the minor leagues at this point. And the Reds are in a position where they're just looking for any spark, any form of energy and just urgency with this team to help. I understand that a lot of this team's issues come with with the lineup and offensively, but you just can never have enough pitching right now. And not really advocating for the Reds to call up Chase Burns this second by any means, but this idea that there's just no way we're going to see Chase Burns in 2025 with the way he's been dominating in the minor leagues. Had a chance to watch him for a few games in Dayton. He's dominating right now in his second stint, again, just continuing to be promoted. But right now, Chase Burns has made 10 starts between High A Dayton and Double A Chattanooga. He is 5-3, guys, with a 1.93 ERA, 69 strikeouts, and only 46 innings. Chase Burns has been basically unhittable throughout his run thus far. That's great, but when Nick Krall was asked about, is there any chance that we could potentially see him called up to the roster at any point. He says it's not something where we're ready to go in that direction. It has a lot of Reds fans talking and frustrated. Why wouldn't you at least consider it? Why would those cards not be on the table? Should they be on the table? Should Chase Burns be considered for a call-up in the near future for this Reds team?
Yes. I don't understand why Nick Krall wouldn't, right? The main concern with pitchers, especially pitchers throwing as hard and as often as Chase Burns is injury. And every single inning he throws in Chattanooga, with all due respect to the great people of Chattanooga that I'm sure love watching him pitch, I don't care if the Lookouts win and lose games. I care if the Reds win and lose games. And if Chase Burns gets hurt throwing for the Lookouts this year, I'm going to be beyond upset. Because in 40 innings or 35 innings, he gets 50 strikeouts in Double-A. Reed asked the question yesterday, what's the point of sending Matt McLain down? I'll ask the question today, what's the point of keeping Chase Burns in Double-A? What does he need to prove? And if he's in AAA and you want to hold him there because you don't want to do service time and things like that or whatever else, maybe that's fine, and maybe that's what they're doing by slowing him down from coming up to AAA. And we do have good pitching right now, but if you can have better pitching, why wouldn't you, right? I just can't wrap my head around why you would willingly keep someone who could be great in your minor leagues, unless it is about money and service time. And that's some stuff that I don't necessarily always have the answers to, but I have a hard time believing that the Reds are doing anything to help this team by having Chase Burns pitch in the minor leagues.
I also think it's a little ironic because when we brought Petty up, everybody was saying he wasn't ready to be up. So that's a little ironic there. Yeah,
it's certainly better numbers so far this year from Burns. I know at a lower level, but the stuff seems to play. And I mean, the Pirates didn't wait to call Paul Skeens up, and you know, I'm sure a lot of people are saying, well, let's not compare Chase Burns to Paul Skeens. Why not? They were compared as prospects coming out of college. Chase Burns' numbers at Wake were very similar to Paul Skeens' numbers at LSU. So they're certainly comparable. And Paul Skeens came up and pitched for the Pirates and helped them win games as a rookie. He won the Cy Young. So I'm not saying Chase Burns is going to come up and win the Cy Young, but I very, very confidently believe that he can come up and help us win games. So I don't really know what he's doing down there. And I know he still has a few starts that he'd have to go through in AAA before he came up. So we're really waiting a while now for a guy that has shown no cracks in the foundation in terms of being a dominant pitcher. So I would love to see him. I hope we see him this year. Yeah. But with the quotes from Nick Krall, I don't know that you can be overly optimistic about that.
Yeah.
This reminds me of like conversations in the NFL with very good backup quarterbacks, or like, you know, you don't want Tim Tebow during his little run in the NFL as a backup quarterback. There's a lot of talk about, you know, Shador. You know, if Shador's your starter, great, but if not, do you really want him as your backup? Because there's just going to be constant noise, and I feel like that's the Chase Burns effect if he gets called up to AAA. If the vibe I'm getting from the front office is that they don't want this to become a big talking point. And I'm wondering if they're going to kind of keep him in Chattanooga for a while, because if you keep him in Chattanooga, you're still a level away before we even consider calling you up, right? Like if they pull the trigger and move him to Louisville, all of us are going to constantly be looking over at Louisville saying, okay, he's like, look at 5 straight games, you know, giving up 2 runs in 5 games. He's just mowing through the order every single time, just absolute complete dominance. Why isn't he called up? I just wonder if it is about service time and all that, which let's not put that past the Reds. And to be fair, let's not put that past any team. It makes sense from a business side. And where I will defend the Reds on, if you're going to give up service time, if you're going to start manipulating that, it needs to be for a reason. And the Reds aren't losing because of pitching as of now. Right. So I'm not screaming from the mountaintop that the Reds need to start moving him up now and get him ready now. That is not even close to being where I'm at mentally with this. But it is funny that chatter is starting to pick up. But I see a lot of people on social media very mad about this article that came out highlighting these things and these comments from Nick Krall. And let's say, Jacob and Pearl, that the Reds announced today, guess what? Chase Burns is going to be called up and he's going to be, part of the Reds rotation moving forward. I don't know what that does for this team. I'm not saying it hurts him, by no means. But is Chase Burns going to be able to provide runs for the Reds in the final 3 innings of games? Is he going to be able to provide offense for this team? I think that right now, I think that the Reds would probably fast forward his track if the Reds were a better team But calling him up just to call him up when that's one of the few strengths of this team is pitching, I just don't see that being the case. I also don't think they want him to be a distraction as far as all the chatter of the call up. I think they keep him in Chattanooga a while, not because he needs to be there, but because they need him to be there so that there's not so much chatter if he's in Louisville where he's just a step away.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% right. And just looking into the service time thing a little bit, the Royals just called up Jack Caglione, the player they took in the first round from Florida last year, the pitcher, hitter, dual threat player. He's incredible, mashing the ball in AAA, coming up to try to help the Royals team now. And it seems like, based on the preliminary numbers of this class, they're going to cost themselves an entire year of Jack Caglione's under contract before arbitration by calling him up 2 weeks early. It was 12 days early, and it's going to cost them an entire year on his arbitration. So that certainly could be something that comes into play with Chase Burns and trying to keep him down and control the money aspect of it. We know that's something the Reds are certainly, caring about with this young core. They know they're not going to be able to extend everybody, so you have to play that game a little bit. They certainly did it with Elly. They did it a little bit with McClain as well. But my thing I just keep going back to is pitching is a position that every single time you get on that mound and throw the ball, there's a decent chance you're going to get hurt. I mean, you're doing something your body shouldn't do. Throw a ball 102 miles an hour and flick your elbow like that and everything along those lines. And to do that in Double-A, when you've proven that you can, I have such a hard time having that risk at a level where the wins and losses just don't matter for a starting pitcher that's showing you that he's elite. So, yeah, I don't know. There's certainly two sides to it, and we'll see what happens. I think it is a much, much easier decision to make if the Reds are 5 games above 500, competing in a wild card spot, competing for the division, something along those lines, or if the pitching was struggling and the offense was great. If this was 2023, then yeah, maybe Chase Burns is up here. So there's a lot of pieces that have to go into it, a lot of variables, and certainly a decision that you have to make sure you have it right. Because what did we talk about? Not even just with pitchers, but with the position players, with Will Benson, with Rhys Hines, when they were in AAA. It's so much more important that they're getting the reps and they're playing well than it is for them to come up and sit on the bench. And I know Chase Burns would pitch every 5 days, but if he struggles and he's up in the majors like we saw with Chase Petty having bad outings, maybe it is better for him long-term to be an ace in this Reds rotation if he is in AAA all year this year. So you have to, debate how he's feeling and how confident he is and things along those lines. Make sure he's ready for the innings and the pitch count that's demanding of the major leagues, and we'll see what happens. But it's going to be tough if he's just winning pitcher of the month after pitcher of the month after pitcher of the month in Double-A. And I have a feeling he could be better than one of the guys starting games for the Reds.
Maybe they're just being a little more, I don't know, just randomly thinking. Maybe they're just being a little more careful with him. Maybe they're trying to be a little, they don't want to preemptively bring him up too quick because, like I was talking about with Petty, that kind of backfired on him.
100%.
So they're seeing how great he's excelling and just don't want to screw him up. Don't want to screw up his development.
Yeah, no, and that certainly carries some weight. And I wonder, we talked about a couple weeks ago or a couple days ago now about potentially moving some people at the deadline, and with the strengths we have in the rotation, maybe you're looking at one of those guys, Nick Martinez or one of the lefties, and then maybe that's when you call Chase Burns up, when you have a natural opening in that rotation. But we have to remember we also have Rhett Lauder, who I know just re-aggravated that core muscle, but he's a guy who last year came up and had an under 2 ERA through his first rookie year with the Reds. So these are two guys that I think all Reds fans expect to be the 2 and 3 behind Hunter Green in their primes when they get to where they're supposed to go. So, yeah, the core of this Reds pitching rotation, which is the strength right now, isn't even here yet. So I think it's cool for Reds fans. I wish we had a better record so we could really appreciate the pitching depth we have in this organization right now, because it's really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's been from opening day to now, we have not been able to really, people say, we highlight too much of the negative. Well, the positives, I think the positives piss me off more than the negatives, because the positives are so positive that if you would have told me that this pitching staff, and I was confident in this pitching staff coming in, is it safe to say this pitching staff has been better than we thought coming in as a whole, from rotation to bullpen?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I think so as well. And if we would have known back in February, heading into March and into opening day, that if we would have just known that this pitching staff would have been this good, that, we would have been a lot more optimistic about this team. And we don't even get to highlight those because it's. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It matters. The only reason we're getting our hearts broken in these close games is because the pitching staff has kept this team in close enough contention to have a chance to win. Last night, only down 1 run. We just needed them to score 1 run just to tie it, just so they can go into extras. By the way, the Reds and Rangers have played. I think 4 or 5 extra inning games. They've scored 0 runs in extra innings. Like they're the worst.
They don't
teams
score
in
late.
baseball. So they
don't score after.
They don't score late.
They barely score at all. Yesterday was the 21st time in 61 games that they've scored 2 or fewer runs this season.
There you go.
But then cool. There's the handful of other times where they score 17 or 24.
Yeah.
So
that's infuriating.
Not good. And by the way, shout out to Greg Kuffner again with the Reds, with Sports Illustrated covering the Cincinnati Reds. It was his article that we were highlighting here. The one thing too I want to go back to real quick as we wrap this up. We got Bengals talk coming up here shortly. Is we're talking about the promotion of Chase Burns to the Major League roster. Where people are confused about is he dominated in Dayton so quickly they promoted him to Chattanooga. And he has dominated Chattanooga from the very beginning. The guy appears to have no flaws. My theory, as I said earlier, I think they want to hold off on promoting him to AAA because I think that's where the noise is really going to pick up to call him up. And I don't think that they want 100%. To. I really don't think that they want to, because I'm reading this article more in depth now. And the question was about, whether they're ready to promote him to AAA. And the quote was not about whether to promote him to the Major League roster. It was mainly about just getting him over to AAA, and that's where they're dragging their feet. I could understand why they're dragging their feet to move him to the Major League roster, but to AAA, I have no clue what they're holding on to. And the quote goes on to say, this is from Nick Kroll, and he told Mark Sheldon, MLB.com, it just depends on how his progression goes. Obviously, there's some things to work on, some speed bumps, but he's pitched really well overall. Speed bumps. I would love to know what high bar of perfection that the Cincinnati Reds organization all of a sudden seems to have, because that seems pretty damn non-speed bumpish to me. 69 strikeouts in 40-plus innings. I'd say that's pretty damn good.
Is the speed bump the 172 batting average against? Is that the speed bump?
He hasn't given
no
up
one on any level has been able to hit him at all. At least get him to AAA and see what he can do there. I don't know, man.
He hasn't given up more than 1 earned run in any of his appearances with Chattanooga at this point. So I'm not screaming to get him to the Major League roster. I'm like, what are we wasting his time for? I think it all goes back to the backup quarterback theory. Once he's in AAA, that clock starts ticking. And every time, if those same numbers carry into AAA, there's no reason not to put him and call him up, and I just don't think they want to. I think it's as simple as that. They don't want to. I don't think they wanted Rhett Lauder. I don't think they wanted to call Rhett Lauder up last year. We've talked about that at length. I mean, Nick Martinez went from the bullpen to having to be a starter because their entire rotation was decimated with injuries, and they had no choice. Rhett Lauder, the only reason he got called up is because the Reds were not going to go and pay money for a veteran pitcher that late in the season. They called him up, and luckily it worked. But yeah, they didn't want to call him up. They don't want to call Chase Burns up. I understand it, but I do think it's the backup quarterback theory. They don't want to send him to Louisville where the noise gets really, really loud, and I can understand that to a certain extent. But don't say dumb things to the media like, well, there's some speed bumps he has to work through. What, traffic? Like, what do we? I think traffic, that's the only thing he's facing heading to the ballpark every day. Then good for him.
Three starts in Dayton in Single A. He's now up to, I believe, 7. Yeah, 7 in Double A for Chattanooga. How many does he get to before he gets to AAA? How many starts for Chase Burns before they call him up? I'm saying at least 3 more. There's no way they give him like 12 starts down there, right?
I think.
Unless he has a bad one or 2. Then maybe you open that door, but.
If my theory is correct, then yes, he will get to 12, maybe 15. I don't
think they're going to move fast on him.
Yeah.
He's not. The Reds have bigger fish to fry, and they have other players to work with right now.
Yeah, I have a tough time believing you take a guy 2nd overall and he has 100 strikeouts through 10 starts in AAA.
I mean, I understand, but as far as like who's on the roster and what spots there are and who they're paying, I don't think they're gonna necessarily prioritize that at the moment. And
we know the Reds ownership cares about money.
The cry for help.
What happens when this team gets 10 games below and out of the playoffs? You get Chase Burns' debut, middle of July, 30,000 people at the park. You think that can swing the needle when everyone stops going to these games? I don't know. Maybe that's our best shot.
I just can't wait for next season when we have 4 different Chase Burns bobblehead giveaways. I mean, that's going to be fantastic. I already got the email.
4 years.
I already got the email for the shipment of new Elly De La Cruz bobbleheads. It's the 3rd Elly bobblehead giveaway this season, or at least in the last year. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we got 2 more coming too.
Yep. Aye.
They know where Brad's buttered.
Off the bench, Justin, Pearl, and Jacob with you here on a Tuesday. Shout out to our guy Elliot. Not here today, no Casey, but the show must go on, and we're continuing on talking about the Cincinnati Reds. We'll transition over to the Cincinnati Bengals. We know how talented the Cincinnati Bengals roster is, but is it one of the most talented rosters in the National Football League? Pro Football Focus put out their roster rankings. You have to scroll a little bit before you find the Cincinnati Bengals. Are you surprised by that? We'll get to that when we come back. All right, and we are back. Justin, Pearl, and Jacob with you here on a Tuesday. The Cincinnati Bengals, as we transition to football. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow. I mean, star power galore, no doubt about it, right? Trey Hendrickson, you think? Or you hope? Fingers crossed, right?
You got to count him at this point, right?
He's on the roster, so technically, yes. Yeah. So, there we go. The big 4. Big 3.5. It's up to him whether it's a 3.5 or a 4 at this point. But we know how talented the Cincinnati Bengals roster is, and I think it's safe to say maybe a little top heavy. I think that the star power of Joe, Jamar, and T in the production of Trey obviously carries the load when you talk about, and I get the debates, when people take shots at Joe Burrow and the Bengals and say, well, look at all the help he has. They're referring to T and Jamar. Even when I've referred to that, like when we talked about the Justin Jefferson debate, who's throwing him the football versus who's throwing Jamar Chase the football. Like we always find ways to manipulate takes when it comes to what's around these individuals. But Joe Burrow definitely has an advantage when it comes to having Jamar and T. Higgins. But how much of an advantage is basically kind of watered out or canceled out when you look at the weakness of that offensive line, the fact that they're not one of the top running teams in football. No, that defense stinks, and special teams was a nightmare last year. We talk about the deficiencies of this Bengals team all the time, but then we get defensive when people point at the deficiencies of this team and say, well, that roster's not very Good. We say it all the time that we talk about all the deficiencies, but when we highlight this team and say, well, they're a Super Bowl contender, they're an AFC North division contender, they could contend for the number 1 seed in the AFC. But then we talk about all the deficiencies, and it's like, how does that correlate? How does that make sense? Pro Football Focus put out their rankings based on the rosters in the National Football League, their roster rankings, and because of Joe, Jamar, and T, I was expecting to see them a little bit higher. I was expecting to see them at least in the top 10. They're not in the top 10. They're not even in the top 15. The Cincinnati Bengals come in at number 18. And the highlight in this article talks about their biggest strength in 2024. Of course, what we just talked about, the trio of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. And then right away, no surprise, no hot take here. And the same article talks about their biggest weakness in 2024, a very, very underwhelming defense. And that might still be the case heading into this season. It's going to have to be, we have to see it to believe it, that this team has improved defensively. Minor adjustments made to the defense, minor additions made to the defense, obviously relying on a draft class to come in and make an impact, a new defensive coordinator, and now Golden. A lot of question marks still with this Cincinnati Bengals team. If we did our top 5 Super Bowl contenders, pretty confident a lot of people would put the Cincinnati Bengals there. Pretty confident Jacob possibly would. We'll get to that later. But it is weird talking about a roster that has so many question marks, so many deficiencies, but we're also so confident in saying, oh yeah, that's a Super Bowl contender. That's the talent of Joe Burrow, of course, and the confidence people have because of him. But number 18, are they the 18th best roster in football? Are there really 17? When you think about Joe, Jamar, and T, are there really 17, and Trey, are there really 17 rosters in the NFL better and more stacked than the Cincinnati Bengals? Do you agree with the ranking, Jacob, the Bengals at 18?
So when I saw this, my plan initially was to get really mad about it and scream and yell a little bit and say PFF's not worth the money and the subscription's dumb and all that stuff. But I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna agree with them, because now I don't have to deal with Joe Burrow has a great supporting cast. Joe Burrow has all the help. Joe Burrow's carried by his wide receivers. None of that. They have the 18th best roster in the NFL. So the fact that they're a top 5 Super Bowl contender with the 18th best roster means they must have a pretty damn good quarterback, right, Pearl?
I do agree with that.
Interesting. So yeah, no, I'm gonna add this one to the tool belt. I screenshot it, and yeah, if you want to give the Bengals the 18th best roster, when Joe Burrow drags that real bad roster to 11 wins in a playoff spot, that's gonna be fun. Underrated this year. I love it.
I mean, but we're used to being underrated. I don't know if I'd put them at 18, but
no, it seems low.
Yeah,
it seems low.
But as Cincinnati sports fans, we're definitely used to being underrated in every aspect. So
yeah, if you go through the Bengals position groups, it's not hard to see how they got there, right? How they got to 18. I think we all, even the most pessimistic Joe Burrow fans in the world, the biggest haters in the world, would at least have him as a top 5 quarterback in the league, and in that room certainly gets there as well. If you want to go to the backups, we saw what Jake Browning was able to do a couple of years ago. I don't know how many 1-2 quarterbacks there are that's better than those two in the entire league. I love Chase Brown. What we saw from him last year, I'd be confident of putting him in the top half of the league in terms of running backs, and then Zach Moss, Samaje Perine, Taj Brooks. I don't know how you could have that much lower than a top half of the league. Wide receiver, certainly number 1. If not number 1, then I guess you could argue number 2. But I would probably stop listening pretty early in that argument. Mike Gesicki at tight end, it's tough with Eric All hurt. I understand that he doesn't play much of an inline tight end. He's more of a wide receiver. But I still think Gesicki, Drew Sample together, that's right around that middle of the pack position for tight end in the entire NFL. And then the offensive line's poor. But I do think the tackle pair is a top 10 tackle pair in the NFL with Orlando Brown and Amarius Mims. Now, I understand the interior 3 positions. Ted Karras, I like him a lot more than a lot of other people. But those inside positions are big question marks. And I have no problem if you want to put them down in the 20s. I think they'll surprise a lot of people this year. But where you get to the problem is the defense. And I understand a lot of this is Bengals optimism, thinking these guys are higher than they are. But B.J. Hill, McKinley, Jackson, Howard, Cross, T.J. Slayton in the middle, those are guys that are much better than they were last year on this defense defending the run. So hopefully they can take a big step. And I know that's optimism, so there's no expectation you have that ranked very low. The only position on defense I would have ranked in the top half of the league is linebacker. I think adding Barrett Carter, adding Demetrius Knight, getting Logan Wilson back healthy. Jermaine Pratt is still here. I think that group is a top half of the league group on this defense. Other than that, everything is projection, so I have no problem ranking this defense somewhere in the 20s. And then McPherson, where do you stand? Where can you stand at this point on McPherson? 2 years ago, he was a shoo-in to the Bengals all-time team if you were building a special team just because of that playoff run. And then last year, he was abysmal and all but cost us a playoff spot. I don't know if I want to put all the blame on him, but certainly makes one or two kicks in the right spots, and we're going to the playoffs. So it's frustrating, and I don't know what you do with Evan McPherson. I guarantee you the Bengals don't bring in any competition for him, but that defense is certainly poor. I think it's going to surprise some people this year, but the offense should be able to carry that above league average. I would certainly have him at least top 15, top 16.
So what it comes down to, and again, it's one thing, okay, so the Bengals come in at 18. Great. I think we can understand the justification of it to a certain extent. A lot of question marks at special teams. The defense has been bad the last couple of years. It ultimately led to Lou Anarumo, who, of course, was the architect of the defense that helped lead them to a Super Bowl a few years ago. They bring in Al Golden. So there's question marks special teams, question marks with the defense. You like the running back room, but there's still question marks with the run game and obviously the offensive line. So there's still a lot of question marks. The fact that they come in at number 18, despite the fact that you're still very positive about this team's ability to go compete and contend for a division title and a Super Bowl, it's because of the talent that is there in Joe Burrow, Jamar, and T, as we talked about. But also, to me, it wasn't so much I was as shocked that they were at 18. I guess it's the teams in front of them.
Right.
And the thing is, and a lot of times, okay, if the Bengals have the 18th best roster, that means, okay, do you want to move up that list? You want a better roster. Would you trade spots with any of these teams ahead of you at this point? And that's the big question. So, like, for instance, the Bengals are at 18. The Chicago Bears come in at number 17. Are you buying that the Bears have a better roster or a better team than the Cincinnati Bengals? And maybe those two things aren't exclusive.
It's a tough question.
Better team, better roster, maybe not exclusive.
The star power in Cincinnati certainly drives them, where I think the common fan would pretty easily say that the Bengals have a better roster. I think if you ask people off the street to rank NFL rosters, the Bengals would probably come in close to the top 10, just because of the Bengals' positions that are lacking are the ones that you don't get to play in fantasy football. So that's why I feel like most people do have the Bengals higher. But the Bears went out and attacked that offensive line this offseason. They added Joe Thuney. They added Jonah Jackson. They already have Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones at tackle. That offensive line's a top 10 offensive line in football. And that's a pretty big discrepancy to the Bengals' offensive line. Now, obviously, there's a big discrepancy as well between Caleb Williams and Joe Burrow. But I don't know how they weight all that, because the offensive line that we do usually group it together, that is 5 positions. So if you are better at all 5 of those, it certainly helps the conversation point. And then where the Bengals usually pick up a lot more ground is that wide receiver with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I don't know if the trio in Chicago is better than the Bengals trio. If you add in Andre Yoshivas, going DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Luther Burden, that's pretty special there as well. And then the running back room of DeAndre Smith, Roshan Johnson, I think falls pretty close to Chase Brown and the Bengals as well. And then the Bears have a better defense. So I do think the Bears roster is a little bit better than the Bengals, though I do think the Bengals are a better team than the Bears just because of who they have playing quarterback and who's touching the ball every play and his ability to overcome some of those shortcomings. So while I do agree, if you're asking me which one of these teams is going to make a run at the Super Bowl, I would still say the Bengals.
If Caleb Williams takes that next big step, and I'm not saying Caleb Williams takes that big step and is better than Joe Burrow, I don't think that's going to happen. But if Caleb Williams, obviously with an offensive-minded head coach, we heard about the chaos and the circus that was the head coaching staff, the coaching staff before, basically not showing him how to watch film, not basically coaching him up, training him, that type of thing. If Caleb Williams takes that next big step, is there a gap between a team like the Bears and the Bengals at that point? And again, doesn't mean Caleb is Joe, but it just means if you get top 10 QB play from Caleb Williams, that's a huge difference maker for a team like the Bears at that point.
Yeah, you're asking the wrong guy here, because if you've watched this show for any amount of time, you know how big of a Caleb Williams guy I am. So yeah, I think if he plays the level that we have some expectation for this year, I think the Bears not only compete for the NFC North, but we're talking about what we saw from the Commanders last year with Jaden Daniels kind of not taking any time to get to that level. I think if Caleb can play at that level of Jaden last year, or even what we saw from Drake May at the back half of this year, or at the back half of the rookie year as well, I think the Bears, the sky is the ceiling for them. I don't know where they'd stop. I think the Bears are going to be really, really good this year.
What do you think about teams like the Dallas Cowboys and the Atlanta Falcons being ahead of the Bengals on this list as well?
Falcons, I agree with. Cowboys, not so much. I think the Falcons are a special team. And maybe, Michael Penix is driving that down in the eyes of a lot of other people because we haven't seen him a ton yet. And obviously Kirk Cousins, if he was starting, I wouldn't have them ranked very high. But I think their offensive weapons are maybe second to none in the NFL. With Bijan Robinson at running back, I still have faith, at least in the receiving aspect, of Kyle Pitts. Drake London is a special receiver on the outside, and they have a pretty solid offensive line with a young defense, the best safety in football in Jesse Bates, we know well up here, and A.J. Terrell is one of the best lockdown corners in all of football as well on the outside there. So they add 2 edge rushers, dominant guys that we talked about the Bengals wanting in this draft class, James Pierce and Jalen Walker from Georgia, both going on that defense. Now, the Falcons did give Jalen Walker number 11, which made me very upset. You don't disrespect Julio Jones like that. He hasn't even retired yet, and you're giving his number away, but that's beside the point. I think they're both going to be phenomenal players. That defense is going to take a big step. Michael Penix is going to take a big step. I love Raheem Morris, so if you're adding coach to this roster rankings, I think they have a pretty significant leg up over Zach Taylor and the Bengals as well. So, yeah, I don't have as much problem with the Falcons. But the Cowboys, you think George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb are anywhere close to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, Skinner?
If Pickens gets his head out of his ass, yes, but I'm not taking them over. I'm not taking them over Jamar and T, but at Pickens talent-wise with CeeDee Lamb, absolutely. I think they're one of the best 1-2, duos in the NFL. But again, it's the mental side for Pickens and him being able to get out of his own way. So I don't trust him. So that's the huge gap right there. Pickens isn't better than CeeDee is one of the best receivers in football. I'm still taking Jamar over him. I like the duo in Dallas. It just looks better on paper than what I think it's going to be, especially when you have inconsistent Dak at times. How frustrated is he going to be? George Pickens, that is. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
But yes, I see what you're saying.
I 100% agree. I just feel like if you're banking on, the question marks of the Cowboys offense, and we know the question marks their defense presents as well, I feel like they're pretty close to the Bengals, and when you look at their star power, there's more consistency for the Bengals side of things. So I don't understand how you could have the Cowboys above the Bengals when you're going down the list. I mean, they lost Zach Martin and Tyrone Smith this year. Their offensive line is going to be just as big of a question as ours is. So I think there's a lot of issues with the Cowboys, and if you go into the coaching aspect again, like I just said with the Falcons, Brian Schottenheimer, I mean, come on. I'll just leave it there. Come on.
All right. Off the bench, Justin Pearl, Jacob with you here on a Tuesday. We'll step away. 1 or 2 more talking points of this list because there's a couple things. How many AFC teams? Okay, we talk about the Bengals having the 18th best roster in football according to Pro Football Focus. But how many AFC teams are ahead of them? How many AFC North teams are ahead of them? We'll take a look when we come back. We're off the bench when we return. Your hard time. Pro Football Focus put out their rankings for the top, or just ranked the rosters in football. The Cincinnati Bengals come in at number 18. Talking about just kind of what stands out on this list. And I know it's not really tying into the Bengals necessarily, but the 49ers coming up on this list. Obviously, every team comes up on this list technically, but they're coming in at number 14. The San Francisco 49ers, I think, are the second best roster in the NFC behind the behind the Philadelphia Eagles. But they're saying as a whole, they're the 14th best roster in football. What are they? I don't get that. I felt like the Niners had one of the deepest rosters in football. Are you surprised that they're sitting at number 14?
Okay, so this is pretty funny because during the break, you said the Niners are ranked 14, and we both said, what? And now I realize we disagree. I think that's way too high for the 49ers. I think the 49ers roster took one of the biggest hits this offseason that we've seen. I would go out on a limb and say they have one of the worst receiving rooms of a contender in football. Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, and Ricky Pearsall, who got shot 12 months ago. I mean,
that sounds like the Steelers' dream wide receiver room, to
right.
be fair. I think they've been in on them every month. I don't know.
Right, yeah, and I don't have a ton of faith in Brock Purdy as this roster continues to devolve now that he's been paid. They have Mac Jones behind him as the backup quarterback. I guess you can give him a nod for having a deep quarterback room, 2 top 10 picks. Kittle, we know he's great. The offensive line outside of Trent Williams, that's a tough group. Dominic Puny's one of the best guards in football, but the other 3 guys are guys we haven't seen a ton of yet. Colton McKivitz gets a ton of credit for being a part of the best tackle duo in football. That's just Trent Williams. He's not that good. He's a league average tackle next to Trent Williams, or Trent Williams is Trent Williams. So it doesn't become as much of a problem. They did just add Bryce Huff, and that is a good addition, but Nick Bosa is still injured this offseason, and we'll see how he's able to come back. You have your Gross Matos. It seems like they're just adding what the Cowboys have kind of done over the last few years, the failed high draft picks from around the league, and trying to hope that works in San Francisco. And maybe it will with Robert Saleh back at the helm of that defense. Kyle Shanahan, the head coach, obviously taking most of the offensive control there, and then adding Saleh back to man that defense. They have the best coaching in the NFL. So if anyone can get a little bit worse of a roster up to par, then yeah, I think it will be that coaching staff. And maybe we are looking here at the end of the year and the Niners are exactly where they've always been. But I think if not this year, we're getting next year and the year after to a significant decline from the San Francisco 49ers. And before you go to the next roster, where do they have the Detroit Lions ranked on this list, Kenner? Because over the last about 48 hours, I would say the Lions had the most significant roster losses in the entire NFL, and I would assume they were pretty high on this list. I would assume they fall pretty significantly.
They come in at number 3.
Yeah, number 3 is right about where I would say they belong until yesterday, right? Frank Ragnow, 29-year-old, 2-time All-Pro, starting center, best center in football. After Jason Kelce retired, he retired yesterday. And without the starting center who's been the mainstay on that offensive line all year, you also lose your 2 starting guards. You're one Graham Glasnow injury away from having the youngest guard-center-guard trio in all of football. And what does Dan Campbell do? What is that whole offensive identity around? It's around controlling the middle of the defense. So if you don't have that dominant interior offensive line anymore, what are the Lions? And I think that's something that's pretty scary because that's not a position that's easy to replace. And what we've heard so far coming out of OTAs is that Tate Ratledge, the guard from Georgia that a lot of Bengals fans hoped the Bengals would take, has been trying to play center in Detroit through OTAs because they thought this was possibly coming with Frank Ragnow. And that's a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl this year that's going to have a first-time center in the middle of that offense. That is very, very scary. And then defensively, you're relying on a lot of young guys to take big steps this year. I don't know. The Lions, very, very good. But you have a new play caller with a new offensive line and a new center who's going to touch the ball every play. That's a recipe for disaster, if you ask me.
Bengals come in at number 18. Pro Football Focus ranking all the rosters in the National Football League. They have the 18th best roster in football, 17 teams ahead of them, as we've discussed. Is that about right? I think with all the question marks, I think we're all on the same page. I think that I don't think they're the 18th best team in football. I think I could agree that maybe the 18th best roster, but I think we can all agree that I don't think it's mutually exclusive that, your roster ranking and the quality of your team go technically hand in hand because top-heavy rosters like the Bengals can overcompensate for a lot of deficiencies. I thought if you would have told me last year that the Bengals would have one of the worst defenses in the NFL, that their special teams would just be hot garbage, and that they'd be one statistically, Jacob, calm down, one of the worst run teams in football, I would have said that team is picking top 5 with maybe Cleveland would have swapped picks with the Bengals in the top 5 to make a move right there as far as that goes. But they still won 9 games. And that shows you right there that even with a lot of deficiencies and a lot of holes to fill on a roster, top-heavy rosters like the Bengals can overcome some of those deficiencies, which means this team technically doesn't even have to be elite and stacked from top to bottom. You'd like it to be. It should be. You would like the front office to not take advantage of Joe Burrow, Jamar, and T and just rely on them to overcompensate for the lack of aggressiveness on their end, but it can be done. And if this team is just average defensively, how much better will that Bengals team be? It's going to be pretty significant. We'll talk about that more later. But as far as the rosters go in the AFC, Jacob and Pearl, 17 teams better than the Bengals, 17 rosters better than the Bengals, according to Pro Football Focus. But what about the AFC? How many AFC teams do you think are ranked ahead of the Cincinnati Bengals in the Pro Football Focus roster rankings?
6. I'll say 6 AFC teams ahead of the Bengals on the roster rankings. That seems like a safe
Fair.
guess.
Do you want to guess who those are? And do you agree with that number, Pearl?
Yeah, I agree. That's fair.
All right, let's see.
Which 6 AFC teams do you think are ranked higher than the Cincinnati Bengals?
Chiefs,
and is this
Bills,
what you think
Ravens.
too? Is this what you think too, or is this what you think that they think?
I'm guessing accuracy on what they think.
All right,
Chiefs,
fair.
Bills, Ravens, Texans, Chargers, Broncos.
All right, you got it. All 6 of those teams ranked ahead. Who do you have a
Holy
problem
cow.
of those 6 teams? Is there a fringe one? Was there another one you were considering?
The Broncos don't belong there, and I would say the Steelers maybe, but also don't belong there.
I thought the Steelers were in there. They're not. Thank goodness, because I remember earlier. I think before the show or before the segment, I said that they're not on there, so that's good.
Okay.
But yeah, of those, who do you have a problem with being ahead of them?
Denver.
Of those teams, Denver,
And just Denver, honestly.
not the Texans.
I don't. I don't. And maybe that's because I'm so biased with how much I love C.J. Stroud, and last year's sophomore slump doesn't really bother me, and I think he's going to go back to what we saw 2 years ago. But a lot like what I said with the Bengals talking about the other receiving rooms in the league, that's where they're going to have to pick up a lot of their ground here, right? Jamar and T have to be significantly better than the other teams 1 and 2 because the offensive line is going to be worse. The defense is probably going to be worse. And if you're looking at the Texans, how much better can we confidently say our trio is than Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, Tank Dell? And they drafted both of those Iowa State receivers in this class, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, who I absolutely loved coming out of Ames. So, yeah, I think their wide receiver room's up there. I don't think you can put Chase Brown comfortably ahead of Joe Mixon yet, unless we're incorporating the contracts, which obviously we do when we talk about roster construction, but just talking about who's better going into next season, you certainly have to give it to Joe Mixon, Dameon Pierce in that backfield. Their offensive line stinks. Their offensive line is just as bad as ours is, so that's a wash. And then you go defense, and they have someone who matches up pretty well with Trey Hendrickson when talking about a dominant edge rusher, and Will Anderson Jr., much younger, much cheaper as well. Just as productive, and then the rest of their defense certainly is better. So, I would say the Texans have a slight leg up over the Bengals. But if you're asking me who finishes higher, I would say the Bengals are a better team. It's just that roster construction can certainly, lean one way based on how many positions there are.
All right, and then I think it was Everett in the chat who said, "Oh, well, who's at the bottom?" That's not a burn anymore. Remember, I'm not a Browns fan anymore.
Right.
So I'm fine talking about who's dead last. Pro Football Focus, 32 NFL teams has the Cleveland Browns ranked dead last with the worst roster in the National Football League. Now, I am a Bengals fan now, right? Like that's how this works. However, I'm not being a homer of my former team here, but I know Cleveland is not the worst roster in the National Football League. Like there's way too many weapons on the defensive side of the ball. I know they have a crap ton of quarterbacks that they're trying to figure out who is who. I do think there are quarterbacks in that room that are going to help make them way better than what they were last year. I'm a big fan of Cedric Tillman. He had quite a few big games post Amari Cooper before the season-ending injury for him, that him and Jerry Jeudy together with random people throwing him the football looked very, very solid side by side. I like their wide receiver room. It's not Joe. It's not Jamar and T. Okay, it's not a top 5 wide receiver room, but they have playmakers, and they're going to have a way better quarterback throwing them the football this year, regardless of who it is in that room right now. I like the running back room. Their offensive line, they improved. I like David Njoku. There's no way, okay, two-time coach of the year, and Kevin Stefanski, Jim Schwartz, former defensive coach of the year. No way that the Browns have the worst roster in the National Football League. Jake, they have teams like the Titans. They have teams like the Saints ranked ahead of them. I would take Cleveland, the Panthers. There's a lot of teams ahead of them. Obviously, every team's ahead of them, but there's a lot of questionable teams ahead of them. I'm not saying Cleveland's top 10 like they were last year, but my goodness, there's no way with pretty much a lot of the same weapons as last year, and Pro Football Focus had them ranked 10th. Now they're dead last. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I do think that ranking last year was pretty reliant on the name value of some of those guys that didn't play up to what we expected. Obviously, at this point last season, we had Amari Cooper in that wide receiver room. We had Nick Chubb in that backfield, right? And Zadarius Smith, I believe, still at that point before week 1 was on that defensive roster as well. So, yeah, I do think, that there has been a pretty significant step back. Now, however, I don't think they're 32nd. I would pretty comfortably have the New Orleans Saints here. I think the New Orleans Saints are an absolute hell. They have Tyler Shough playing quarterback. They have Alvin Kamara making $40 million at running back. That's a bad, bad place to be. I think the Saints are in distantly the worst position in the NFL. However, I don't think the Browns are much higher. I don't know that I would necessarily get them above about 28 or so if you go through the arguments. Just going through the teams you listed off right there, I would take the Panthers over the Browns roster right now. So you don't have a ton of wiggle room in my mind, but I do think you are, much like the Bengals are, with a lot of questions at these positions. The Browns are carried by their star power. When you have the best defensive player in football in Myles Garrett, your defense simply can't be the 32nd ranked defense. So I think that they deserve a little bit more credit. I know we haven't seen them yet, but the rookie running backs, Dylan Sampson and Quinshon Judkins, two very, very exciting players that I wish were anywhere else than Cleveland and in the AFC North. I think they're both going to be special. And then outside of just Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, I know he's been a locker room cancer for about the last 5 teams he's gone to and tanked them. But if Deontay Johnson can play anywhere close to the level we saw in Pittsburgh before he did his bounce around, maybe even what we saw in Carolina before he left the Panthers, this receiving trio can be pretty good. Maybe David Bell from Purdue takes that step that we haven't seen yet. Jamari Thrash from Louisville's a burner. Maybe you can get him, pretty competent on the outside. I think this wide receiver room has been affected very, very negatively development-wise by the quarterback play and the conversation around the quarterback and the offense the whole time that most of these guys have been there. We saw Jerry Jeudy take a massive step last year when Deshaun Watson went out. We saw when Flacco came in 2 years ago. There was a new belief in the core of this roster. I think now that we can turn the page from Deshaun Watson and the Browns can focus on getting a quarterback in there that you think can win games, hopefully the Shadur Sanders nonsense isn't as big of a distraction as that was. Obviously two different things, but you want to focus on football. And if the Browns are able to focus on football, they're not going to be the worst team in the league.
All right, we wrap up the show. When we come back, Reds predictions, Game 2 tonight. Hunter Green on the mound. Do the Reds get a Game 2 win over the Brewers, a team of which they've struggled with mightily, not just this season, but over the last 4 years? We'll be right back. Reds Brewers tonight, Game 2 of this 3-game series. Hunter Green going to be on the mound. But the Reds, at times, it doesn't matter who's on the mound. It doesn't matter who's in the lineup. It doesn't matter who's hot, who's not. The Reds just can't seem to get it done against the Milwaukee Brewers. They've lost 17 of the last 21 against the Brewers at Great American Ballpark, and they've also lost, they're 14-35 against the Brewers over the last 4 years. So is Hunter Green on the mound tonight enough for the Reds to put an end to this 3-game losing streak and their struggles against the Brewers? Can they have at least success tonight. Can the Reds get it done? Predictions. Pearl, we'll start with you. Do the Reds end this 3-game losing streak? Do they get a win with their ace on the mound? Do we get a big performance from Hunter Green tonight? How do you see this playing out at Great American Ballpark? Do the Reds get a win?
I feel like the greatest chance of a win in this series is today.
Has to be.
Yeah. I mean, we have Green, but we don't usually score a lot with him on the mound, but you know, he holds it down for us, so I'll guess 2-1 Reds.
Okay, 2-1 Reds. So an offensive explosion, if you will. I'll go 6-3 Reds.
Whoa.
6-3 Reds,
Scoring
and they're
early.
down 3-2 at the end of the 6th inning.
What?
Ooh, historic night at
That's bold.
Oh
GABP.
yeah.
That's bold.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Defying the odds.
Maybe win a rubber match too.
So with Hunter Green on the mound tonight, I don't expect a lot of runs by the Brewers. I mean, look, Hunter Green is fantastic, but so is this Reds rotation as a whole. They got good pitching last night. The Reds are getting good pitching every night.
Right.
Tonight really just comes down to, are they going to put runs up? I'm going to say 4-2 Reds. I think they have to get a win. We talked about it earlier. I hate the must wins, but anytime Hunter Green's on the mound, a lot of good pitchers in this rotation, but he's just different. He's their ace. He's a Cy Young caliber talent. Anytime you're getting a Cy Young caliber performance and you don't come away with the win, it almost should count as 2 losses, and it feels like 2 losses at times. I mean, the Reds might lead the league. They may not lead the league in losses, but I think they lead the league in squandered opportunities. When you talk about the quality of pitching that they get, whether it's performances from the bullpen or the rotation or just opportunities down late, they squander so many opportunities. They can't squander a great performance tonight from Hunter Green. I think the Reds get a 4-2 win to tie the series and, make us all sit up in our chair for tomorrow's noon toast. So
I hope
who
so.
knows?
Now, before we shut it down, Kenner, we do have some Reds breaking news. Tim McGraw, pre-game concert for the Motor Speedway game against the Braves at the beginning of August, and he will be joined by none other than Mr. Worldwide. Mr. Worldwide, Mr. 305, Pitbull. The Pitbull is joining Tim McGraw for the pregame concert at the Speedway Classic. Mr. Worldwide will take the stage with McGraw for a special performance on August 2nd before the Reds and Braves make history at Bristol Motor Speedway. So if you were on the fence about going to see the Reds play at Bristol Motor Speedway in August this year, that just shoved you right over. Because, I mean, if you get to see Mr. Worldwide in person, where would you rather be?
I have a problem with that graphic. That graphic is so disrespectful to Tim McGraw. I mean, to sit there and have Pitbull just taking up the whole thing. Pitbull with small print Tim McGraw.
To be fair, this was the Pitbull announcement.
Yes.
They already announced that Tim McGraw was the headliner, was the main concert. This was just announcing that Pitbull was going to be joining him there today.
Fair enough. But I will say, how much of this has to do? I do think that I love that the Reds are in this, but I think baseball, as cool of feature games as they do, I think they do a horrible job at the teams that they pick for this. Now, the Braves, I think the problem too, this Braves-Reds series, I think when they announced this, I was like, oh, finally. Like when the Reds got the, what was the game a few years ago? In the
Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams, yes. I almost said Game of Thrones. How stupid would that have been? Field of Dreams. In that game, like the Reds were horrible. That was that 100-loss season. I was like, man, of all times for the Reds to be featured in something like that against the Cubs, I was like, I just thought it was a bad, I thought they picked bad teams for that. There were some historical, references there for the Reds, obviously one of the, historic teams of baseball, but I just thought they do a bad job picking these teams. I thought they picked them right this time. It's just unfortunate because Reds and Braves are two of the most underperforming teams in the National League this year. They have come up well short of expectations at this point. So you got to wonder, they're adding all these extra big names for these concerts and stuff. They're doing everything they can to make sure they fill as many seats as possible because I think ticket sales might be taking a hit when you talk about an underperforming Braves team and a team that's underachieving like the Cincinnati Reds, both teams underachieving. But man, oh man, the star power will be there, but will the interest be there with the way the season's going for both teams? We'll see.
Last thing before we get out of here, some pictures I did want to share with everyone just came across my desk about a couple minutes ago. Peyton Manning is at Bengals practice today, presumably filming some sort of Peyton's Places. As you'll see in the next picture, he's rocking the Ken Anderson. I'll take that as a Hall of Fame endorsement for the Bengals quarterback. He deserves to be in Canton. He's not yet. Peyton coming down, doing his thing, letting everyone know that he deserves to be there. I'm excited for this episode. I didn't know this was going to happen. I assume he's not just down here for fun. I think he'll be down here to film something, and that should be great. I love to see Joe play around with Peyton. That'd be a lot of fun. Two of the most cerebral quarterbacks we've ever seen. Would certainly be great to see them talk ball. That's a lot of fun. I'm excited for that episode.
Oh, your quarterback. Our quarterback's a hat on backwards QB, huh? Colin Cowherd.
Yeah, don't show Cowherd.
He'd be so disappointed. But all right, everyone, thank you for tuning in and hanging out with us here today. Rumor has it, Elliott's back tomorrow. That's the rumor.
That's the word on the street. That's the rumbling.
We might have a full house tomorrow because the other rumbling is that Reed will be in studio. What
a time to be alive.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, good stuff. Pearl, thank you. Jacob, thank you. Our viewers, thank you. Give the show a like on the way out. Until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, 1410 ESPN Radio, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube.